For most of his life with Din Djarin, Grogu has been the one carried out of danger. This film makes Grogu save Din, because their bond cannot become family until protection starts moving both ways. Every rule about hiding, waiting, and never touching the buttons is really a test of when a protected child becomes responsible for the person who protected him. The night that changes Grogu begins with him hiding in a hole in the floor, because that is where his father told him to stay. Outside, the bounty hunter Embo takes down Din Djarin and hauls him into the rain, and when Grogu emerges, he can only watch the ship leave. That is not weakness you are watching, it is training. Grogu's entire personality is built on one rule, handed down in a cockpit and enforced with love. Do not touch anything, never touch the buttons. He follows it because obedience is how a foundling makes sense of protection, and somewhere along the way, Grogu decided that being protected and being loved are the same thing. So the real question of this movie is not whether Grogu is strong enough, but how long staying small can pass for a survival plan before it costs him the only person he has. Here's what Grogu wants, and the film is honest about how comfortable it looks. He wants the pouch. He wants to ride on Din's shoulder, get handed snacks, and have the whole galaxy shrink to the warm space between a Beskar chest plate and a satchel strap. Watch the raid on the Imperial Mountain Fortress. Grogu helps neutralize the ground defenses with the Force, then folds himself back into the carrier like a tool being returned to its box. Din is not the villain in this arrangement. He is the reason it works, checking the kid's armor before a mission, telling him it has to fit snug, and building rules around him like extra plating. But what Grogu needs is the one thing the pouch can never give him, proof that he is enough when nobody is holding the handle. His blind spot is simple and dangerous. He believes the arrangement is permanent, that Din will always be the one who bleeds, and the entire back half of this movie exists to collect on that mistake. The first crack in the rule shows up during the escape from Shikari, and it is played for laughs right up until you notice what it reveals. Din and Zeb Orrelios have just dragged Imperial fugitive Janu Coin out of his compound with soldiers in pursuit, and with both warriors occupied, the ship's controls fall to the one crew member expressly banned from the dashboard. So Grogu climbs up and presses the exact buttons he was told never to touch, and the getaway works because the child finally commits the only crime he knows. He is good at it too, which should surprise nobody who has noticed how much of this film Grogu spends silently watching Din's hands on those controls. Then comes the detail that actually matters. The moment the adults are back in their seats, Grogu gives the ship back and folds into his chair like he is returning stolen property. That is the Flaw in miniature. He will act when the alternative is death, and not 1 second before, and afterward he hands his own power back as if it never happened. Nobody discusses it, and the rule stays the rule, which is fitting, because the sharpest diagnosis of what is wrong with this child comes from somewhere else entirely, a Hutt lying in a fighting pit cage. Rotta the Hutt is the reason any of this is happening. Jabba's sole heir, held on the moon of Shikari, and the price the Hutt twins set for their intelligence on Commander Coin. Except Rotta refuses to be rescued, because the supposed kidnapping victim turns out to be a celebrated pit fighter working off a contract to Lord Janu, and he likes his life. His speech in the cage is the movie's thesis. They feared his father, but they cheer for him, and for the first time in his life, he is not living in Jabba's shadow. Now put the two sons side by side. Rotta bleeds in a pit night after night to get out of a father's shadow, while Grogu's whole life plan is to never leave one. The scene underlines it with one perfect beat, Rotta pausing his Independence Manifesto to gently hand-feed Grogu. And here is the wry part. Both of them are kidding themselves, because Janu's plan for Rotta's final match is a rigged gauntlet of monsters, meant to end with the Hutt dead, which means the freedom Rotta thinks he is earning was never for sale. Shadows do not expire when a contract does, and they cannot protect you simply because you love the person casting one, and neither son has figured that out yet. After Din turns Janu Coin over to the New Republic, the Hutt twins' answer arrives at night, in the rain, wearing a very wide hat. Embo and the wolf beast Kibu hit the camp, and Din does what Din always does. He stashes Grogu beneath the floor and turns to handle the problem alone. Grogu obeys, because that is the deal. Din fights, and Grogu hides, and that is how this family has always divided the labor. This is the night the deal fails. Kibu carries off one of the Anzellan mechanics. Din is subdued and taken, and Grogu crawls out of hiding into a camp with nobody left in it. He watches the ship lift off from behind the rocks, soaked, tiny, and completely unharmed, which is the cruelest part, because the rule worked. Staying small kept him safe and cost him his entire world. Whatever denial he had left dies right there in the mud. Hiding only counts as a plan, while the person you hide behind cannot lose, and Grogu has just watched him lose. So the Pouch Dweller mobilizes, flying to Nal Hutta with the remaining Anzellans and breaking into the twins' palace through the plumbing. Below them, the twins strip off Din's helmet to unmake him as a Mandalorian and drop him into their monster pit. And while he fights his way through Amanan warriors and a colossal dragon snake, the venom in his blood is already deciding who will have to become the caregiver. The escape reaches the Anzellan's craft, but Din knows the venom and the pursuing droids will bring everyone down with him. He puts Grogu aboard, orders the ship into the sky, holds the droid army off for as long as the poison allows, and goes down alone in the swamp. It is the last order he ever expects Grogu to follow, and it is the one Grogu finally breaks. The ship vanishes into the clouds, and then Grogu comes back, on foot, through a dark swamp full of things that hunt, to sit beside a body he refuses to treat as one. What follows is the quiet center of the film. Grogu finds a fisherman deep in the marsh and comes away with an antidote, along with a warning that the cure may already be too late. He gives it to Din anyway, and then keeps vigil, with insects crawling over the Beskar and security droids sweeping the trees, until his father opens his eyes. When Din wakes, the relationship has been rebuilt without a word being spoken. The foundling carried the Mandalorian, and both of them know it. So when Din chooses to stop running and take the fight to the twins, the plan has a real job in it for Grogu, and the job is not hiding. While Din duels Embo through the palace, Grogu is the one who frees Rotta. And when the platform above the monster pit gives way and Rotta plunges toward the same water that poisoned Din, Grogu catches the falling Hutt with the Force, floating him gently to safety while the twins drop past and are eaten by the beast they kept. The palace dies on Din's own instruction, New Republic bombers flattening it while he, Grogu and Rotta leap clear into the swamp, and what remains after the smoke is the accounting. Rotta answers his shadow problem by walking away from the Hutt underworld and staying to work with the New Republic, and before Din and Grogu leave, he gives the child a gentle pat on the head. That pat reads differently now. Because it is not a big creature being kind to a pet, it is one fighter thanking another for his life. Then comes the ending this entire study has been pointing at. Din sits Grogu in the pilot seat of the Razor Crest, wraps the small green hands around the controls, and teaches him to fly. Grogu makes the jump to hyperspace himself, pressing the actual forbidden buttons with his father's hand still guiding his. What he gained is standing. He boarded this story as cargo, and he leaves it as crew. What he lost is permanent, the belief that anyone is unbeatable, because a child who has seen his father face down in a swamp can never fully move back into the pouch, and nobody who has flown the getaway and caught a Hutt over a monster pit gets to play helpless again. And what it means is the part Din understood all along. The rule was never about buttons. It was about not yet. Rotta had to leave his father's shadow to become someone. Grogu never leaves Din's shadow at all. He grows until he casts his own beside it, and that is the only version of freedom this film believes in. The fisherman gives the lesson its own words. The old protect the young, and then the young protect the old. Grogu saves Din because he must learn that love is not passive shelter, but reciprocal responsibility. He does not become Din's equal overnight. With Din's hand still guiding his on the controls, he remains a child and an apprentice, but now one trusted to carry part of the danger. That is why the final cockpit image matters. Grogu is no longer cargo waiting to be saved, but family who knows why we do not leave our own behind. If you want to keep exploring the minds behind your favorite icons, subscribe and join us for a new study every week. Drop a comment below. What do you think really drove Grogu?